So what do you do exactly when you learn from the Bible that America will succeed in Iraq during the highest unpopularity of the war, when even major Republicans were distancing themselves from the war before the surge existed? A time when Bill Oreily was saying that Iraq had no chance of success because of that civil war. A time when the American people were losing faith in the war. So if I truly believe in Bible prophecy, I have to make some kind of a public record that will predate America's success in Iraq. I have to contact senators and media heads in my own area. I have to give them copies of my book and get myself into the newspapers predicting Iraq's success long before the surge. In 2006, I walk into KPVI Channel 6 and talk with investigative reporter Doug Anderson for almost an hour, telling Doug America will win in Iraq, giving Doug a copy of my book, showing the Bible scriptures which prove my point. I then go directly to the Idaho State Journal and talk with Chief Editor Ian Fennell concerning my book's declarations about Iraq's coming success during the worst possible time for Iraq succeeding. I give Ian a copy of my book and get myself into the newspaper itself, making a permanent public record predicting Iraq's success.
Paul was so moved by his biblical discovery about Iraq that he arranged a luncheon meeting with Senator Mel Richardson and his son Mark, where Paul explained his evidence about Iraq and 9/11 to the senator at a restaurant in Idaho Falls. Of course, senators cannot endorse any book dealings with religion, but can honestly acknowledge that a citizen in their state wrote a book predicting Iraq's success long before the surge began, without endorsement. Paul established an earlier public record during the Okjahoma bombing, where he warned the national media about a coming disaster just 2 days before the bomb went off. Paul became front-page news of one of the largest papers in the West, called the Salt Lake Tribune, because of his prior warnings before the Okjahoma bombing. Paul was invited to be a guest on a prominent talk show with Senator Dave Bresnahan, who is today a nationally recognized investigative reporter. The senator acknowledged on the air that Paul's predictions occurred before the bombing and were postmarked the day before the bomb went off.
Day before the bombing, and they received it shortly thereafter, and so that does give credibility to the fact that you were aware or could predict the potential for this kind of violence to take place.
Welcome back to Talk Back with David Bresnahan. We have on the line a guest this afternoon. His name is Paul Gregersen, and Paul is the author of the book Mark of the Beast. And Paul, we have been just going to our phone lines and taking some questions. We'll go back to the lines in just a moment. The phone numbers to call locally. Now, in the paper, they implied that you predicted a violent event, but that you predicted a violent event would take place. Is that right?
I did, and I had told every organization in the country about it, every news organization, as far as the major networks about it.
According to the paper, the information you sent was postmarked the day before the bombing, and they received it shortly thereafter. And so that does give credibility to the fact that you were aware or could predict the potential for this kind of violence to take place.
Yes, and I actually predicted it March 25th. And
back to you, Courtney and Doug.
All right,
thanks, Kim. Another local man says he is not surprised by militia involvement in Wednesday's bombing. In fact, he says he predicted it a long time ago. Paul Gregersen's book, The Mark of the Beast, explains the fears of the militia and warns of radical events such as the bombing.
And a lot of these people are genuine patriots who believe that the United States is being taken over.
I don't know much yet. I'm going to have a press conference today and get all that out. Can you tell us about it, Dick? Well, I don't know what
going to be happening in the world. You have a very impressive record as far as the Oklahoma City bombing goes.
Yes, I was front page of the Salt Lake Tribune after I published my book, my first book in 1993.
We're going to talk to somebody that I think we'll find very, very interesting. Paul, are you there?
I'm right here.
Oh, very good, and you're coming in loud and clear. This is Paul Gregersen. Paul was featured in a news article in the Salt Lake Tribune this past Sunday, and the article talked about the fact that he is the author of a book called The Mark of the Beast, which was published in 1993, and he's going to do some debunking. He is going to tell us why the conspiracy theories that have been out there are wrong.
Certainly, many of you might remember the famous actor who played Herman Munster in the popular TV show The Munsters, starring Fred Gwynne. Fred had a national talk show several years before his death, and he heard about me and called me up at home. And I became a guest on his national show.
Chuck Carter at 12:05 each afternoon. Back to the phones. We're talking to the author of a book on the Mark of the Beast. His name is Paul Gregersen. He's out in Pocatello, Idaho, and he's on the horn here this morning to explain how he came to solve the riddle of the beast. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. We got Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and we've got Daniel the prophet's version of it, or his interpretation, and it comes down to a lot of sixes and the sign of the beast, and that turns out to be a man, right? That's right. And it's not just the man in the king's dream. They call that in the image.
David Bresnahan, we're familiar with his name. He's an investigative reporter.
Uh-huh.
And who else was on the line with you?
That was a caller. Her name was Phyllis or something. I can't remember.
Okay.
But, there was a lot of callers. I was, as far as Utah media. Peter Jennings even called me from New York. I talked with his office on the phone.
It's one thing to predict major events accurately. However, to publish them and create a public record before these events even happen cannot be falsified. Have you ever seen Pat Robertson or John Hagee or even the Pope ever accomplish such a feat in history?
Frequently today, we see the embarrassing results when media figures confront ministers who have made false prophecies that have not come to pass.
Yes, I are. But you convinced your followers that there would be a nuclear war in 2006 and 2007. As I recall, you brought it up to occur in 2000. It hasn't happened. What became of the prophecy? How were you so misled by Yahweh?
I really don't know how to describe the difficulty and frustration I felt trying to convince local and national media that I was sounding off like this because I wanted to either save lives or prevent bad things from continuing to happen. I was willing to make a fool out of myself and even be wrong publicly rather than just sit there and do nothing at all. Blatantly obvious to all is the counterproductive result of involving churches or church leaders into political campaigns. And we have seen the Reverend Wright and others turn this political campaign into a religious fiasco. But Daniel the prophet was an authorized prophet with the authority to speak politically about his time as well as ours. Because he is so far in the past, though, he speaks for God without involving any modern church into politics. He could write a prophecy favoring George Bush going to Iraq and remain independent from every church today. Any church leader today, however, would be branded with political motivations, where Daniel would not. Perhaps God foresaw a terrible problem today stemming from the Iraq War and 9/11 and commanded Daniel to send a message from the past. Perhaps we can understand his words today because we are now living through the prophecies that he wrote about. Do you believe Daniel was a true prophet of God who could speak into the future about us? I believe he did.
It is easy to claim things about theology without having to put your insights to such a public test. Either Paul discovered the actual meaning for Daniel's prophecies, or he made the luckiest predictions of our time.